Well, we're live, and by we, I mean just hotlou today. Unless somehow Hot Mic 3 is able to work his way into some different software that we're using today. But as we transition into summer and reopening all of the world, things are going to be a little bit different with hotlou Happy Hour, and Mike and I are trying to figure it out too. In the meantime, everybody out there, all the lunatics, we're really hoping to get your feedback on what you want to see on the show. Maybe you want less hotlou, and maybe just you want Hot Mic 3. I wouldn't blame you one bit, for the record. It's been a wild ride, obviously, and we're trying to figure out how we can do this show every single day, and it's gonna be a little bit of an adventure. But in the meantime, let's see. I think I already played the music, but welcome to hotlou Happy Hour. I am your host, Lou Abramowski, or somewhat embarrassingly known as hotlou, and I'm speaking on behalf of the cops because today's going to be a little bit of a quick show, but I really wanted to specifically talk about just the weird cluelessness that we're seeing out of a handful of the cops. And it's disappointing, and I'm hoping I can share my screen here, but bear with me as I kind of try to work this out here, as I add in another screenshot here. But I think everybody's probably seen, I think his name is Mike Amira, kind of ranting to the press about how they're not part of the problem. So I'm going to try to dial that up here. And as I clear my throat, let's see. Well, this is it's quite the adventure, isn't it? Let's do display capture. Is that what we're looking for? Very different, very, very different hotlou Happy Hour today, no doubt. I wonder, let's go to window and then pick the, oh wow. Okay, this is turning out to be far more challenging than I thought. But is that, oh gosh, what a show. Is everybody just super excited at this point? Let's see what happens when I do that. Nope, did not work. New software, all kinds of craziness. Oh man, this should have worked, but looks like we're not able to do that exactly. So let's see what happens, and I'm looking for some feedback from the lunatics that if I switch over to this and share my screen, whether or not the audio is coming through. Looking for you lunatics to let me know if the audio is coming through. Okay, we're already getting feedback from the lunatics that the audio did not come through. So, and I got some great feedback from some lunatics that were wondering if the luxurious hotlou Happy Hour Studios paid for the software, and they didn't indeed pay for the software, did not pay for the training, however. But let me just recap this, and we'll put it in the show notes. This Michael O'Meara, the head of the New York State's Police Benevolent Association. And as I understand it, that's literally the name of it. The effectively is lecturing the press that out of over 300 million interactions every single year, there are just a handful of these really, really bad and I mean unconscionable actions taken by the police. And he goes on to say a bunch of just absolutely ridiculous things. But the one that really stuck with me the worst was this notion that they demand respect. And I'm pretty curious to hear from you lunatics in all of the comments here. Um, because this is something that you hear kind of this statement only from people in authority, generally speaking, because people who are not in a position of authority never demand respect because they know that they're not in a position to demand that respect. And in fact, it's the exact opposite. They know if you are in some sort of um, position like that, that you have to earn that respect. And it's pretty funny to me to hear somebody, effectively a police union police officer, talk about the fact that they demand respect when they're in a position they have far more control over whether the public respects them than just screaming angrily into a crowd. And I have to say that it actually has, I think, a very negative impact. And like ironically, the exact opposite ends up happening. I think the public will end up resenting somebody who demands respect and hasn't actually shown the behavior to earn it. And with that in mind, I I have to say, and I'm very curious from the lunatics. And I appreciate the lunatic Dan Hunt with the heckle on when Mike's coming back, and I don't have the answer to that, other than probably tomorrow. Um, I'm very curious for the ones that have seen this video, because I obviously can't share it. Like hearing Mike Amira talk this way, did it actually motivate you to want to show more respect to the police? And I suspect the answer is no. Um, and I'd be super curious if anybody has been in that position, and um, the I, if you've been in that position and you've seen the leader in your group talk to the public that way, how did it make you feel? How did it make you feel to see them passionately demand that a secondary group get excited about it? Because one of the things that I have to point out, and I'm going to share the screen again here, because even though the audio is not there, one thing that I find pretty interesting about this photo is that it's basically all white dudes in this group, and it's really reminiscent of the 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 video that we showed, I think, last week, of Trump basically telling a group of police officers in the same area in New York to not be too nice. And you see the group of a bunch of people behind them kind of applauding. And actually, after this, after he gets done talking, you see um, a handful of these police officers all applaud. And I can see, being in the police officer's shoes, that hearing like an impassioned officer here in this exact spot get really super excited to see an impassioned leader kind of coming and backing them up. Um, you know, he, I, I can, I empathize with all the cops and how awesome it is to hear somebody kind of back them up. But I don't think that's a statement that you can make in public. I think that's something that maybe you adjust the commentary a little bit, and then you have one of these. kind of impassioned speeches to get some unity. But then you go in the public and you have to actually understand that when what seems like the entire world is not with you and criticizing you, that you don't stand up and basically say you're wrong. Because in this particular case, it is maybe not the perpetrator. Mike Amira, as far as we know, is not the perpetrator of, what happened with any of the scenes and videos of police brutality that we've seen over the last 200 years, or videos, maybe the last 70 or something. However, you know, what what the uninitiated will see in this particular case is a guy wearing the same uniform, and you know what, I'm going to call it a costume. He's draped in the exact same clothing as the people that we see committing these like atrocities, and then kind of inexplicably plays the victim card while wearing the costume of the perpetrators. And when you see that happen, you just, you kind of understand where that frustration is coming from, because I think everybody agrees that there's a bunch of good cops out there. But what people also agree with is that there's a bunch of bad cops not doing the right thing, and that's understating it. They're straight up doing the worst criminal act short of a genocide that I can think of. And there's not enough cops outwardly saying how bad these things are. In fact, we see a lot more public outcry from the police, not condemning the actions, but in fact just coming to the defense of everybody, with a badge. And at the end of the day, we've got nobody's going to sympathize with them that's on the outside, that has also really understood what it means to see a black man who seemingly his only crime was a non-violent one, and to be treated with all that violence is kind of crazy. Like, it's kind of shocking to see the perpetrators playing the victim card. And you actually see this a lot. You see the bullies trying to turn into the victims. And it's a form of gaslighting that is kind of terrifying, because it will work on some people. It's certainly going to work within the police department, at least on a large enough scale that the people who do want to speak up they're going to get ruined. And I have to, oh man, I'd love to share my screen, but this software that we paid so much money for and not for the training, don't have the ability to share exactly what we're looking for, but maybe I can look for it. We talked about it a little bit on the show a few days ago, but this whole notion of there's only a few bad apples. I'm going to remind everybody that what's funny about that expression, that it's only a few bad apples, is that the full expression of that is a few bad apples spoil the barrel. Something along those lines. And I'm kind of distracted as I open up this image that I'm going to share. But I think it's pretty hilarious here. This amazing photo here of Bob Kroll. This is the expression that a few bad apples spoil the barrel, because the bad apples start emitting this gas that actually makes all of the apples ripen much, much faster. And then it makes them all bad apples. And the counter argument to that is that, sure, if we get rid of the bad apples, then we don't have to worry about it. The problem is that a few bad apples, if you don't immediately get rid of them, it actually makes them all bad apples, which makes this image, I think, like, absolutely hilarious. And it's, it's not fair. It's not fair to the police to just label them all as bad apples. But man, some of the most reasonable people that I see all over the place, all over the internet, and in my life are surprisingly suddenly turning very anti-police, and I think it's because of sentiments like this Michael O'Meara guy. And somebody made this really amazing supercut, and since I can't really share the audio from it, I will put it in the show notes. But there's this amazing supercut of this guy's speech, uh, and the supercut cuts back and forth with all of the police violence that we're seeing in response to the rioting to try to draw awareness and stop police brutality, which we've talked about the irony of that too. It's so funny that in the context of not having any sort of police brutality and trying to actually shift police reform, that during these protests, the police are relying on some police brutality. And it's just so rampant. I just cannot believe how much it's happening. And Michael O'Meara, in particular, it's shocking to me to see that in this particular case, one of the worst offenses that we've seen so far, and I'm going to try to throw it in the show notes, is there's a woman kind of backpedaling in front of the officers that are trying to kind of clear out the protest in what looks like it was after curfew, and one of the officers just all of a sudden just pushes her at least hard enough that there's no way that she could have kept her balance, and in fact is thrown against the concrete and smashes her head on, maybe it's not concrete, maybe it's asphalt, but whatever the case, she ends up having a seizure, goes to the hospital, and the next time we hear from her, it's from her hospital bed. And we're seeing that exact same thing happening also from in other cases here, which is crazy. And I'm laughing because I'm getting heckled by our lunatic Dan Hunt here, but we saw the same thing in Buffalo. We've got what appears to be a very peaceful 75-year-old man actually returning police property to the police. One of the cops shoves him pretty gently, but it's a 75-year-old man. He gets shoved to the ground. And then to top it all off, we've got the President of the United States pretending that this was some sort of false flag from Antifa and some sort of setup. And we'll I keep saying we're going to throw it in the show notes. And Dan Hunt wants me to take a screenshot of the links for the show notes. But man, what a crazy time. And like, we're in the midst of all of this stuff. We're in the midst of what seems to be the most aggressive public outcry for police reform to end police brutality. And I don't think we've seen the density of police brutality caught on video ending up on the internet as we have seen over the last 2 weeks. Talk about just absolute, like, complete irony. It's been really a really sight to behold. And then on top of everything else, Michael O'Meara comes out and tries to play the victim card. And now this guy is going to be completely eviscerated. And that's the scary part here, is that we've got a bunch of police officers that are going to come to this guy's back, applaud him, thank him for doing such great work. And yet I think it's going to end up being a net negative for people who are trying to want to empathize or sympathize with the difficult job that it is being a police officer. I mean, being a police officer is tough. There's no doubt about it. I don't know if it's as tough as live producing your show using software you don't really fully understand, but you know, if I may, you know what, if Michael O'Meara can play the victim card, so can I. I think that's fair. Maybe we'll, you know what, we're gonna start a poll. We're gonna start a poll. You know what? If I try to, we'll just publish this poll instead, because this will seem like pretty interesting. Watching this video though, this Michael O'Meara video, and watching the police behind just kind of celebrate. Kind of reminds me of, and we're going to throw this in the show notes too, is I don't know if anybody out there has been watching this new YouTube channel that's kind of catching fire right now, but it's called Cartnarks. It's CartNarcs, and I will pull this up, even though it's not going to be all that interesting to watch without the videos here. But this Cartnarks thing is incredible, and what it is Cartnarks is this guy from this like morning LA radio show, I think, called The Woody Show. And it's one guy on the show, his name's Sebastian. And man, he is just absolutely hilarious. And the way that he deals with some of these people, and I keep pushing this off, but specifically what Cartnarks is this guy, Sebastian, like I said, basically keeps pointing out to people, and I suppose I can share the video here uh, and watch it even without the audio. But this guy basically, because this kind of demonstrates the point, he flags down these people who just leave their carts sitting out either on the curb or in other lanes, and he basically pretends he's like some like official and flags them down. And he says, "Hey, that's not where the cart goes." And he just, it's a little, it's not antagonistic just plainly, and he says it all the time. Like 90% of the people that he flags down, he specifically tells, he says most of them just are like, you know what, you're right, I was being lazy, I'm gonna go take care of the cart. They walk out. But like 1 out of 10 of them immediately get super defensive about it, and they get kind of angry for being called out. And then he has these magnetic bumper stickers that he throws on the back of the cars. Of course, a lot of cars are just made out of fiberglass now, or aluminum, which isn't magnetic, so sometimes it doesn't stick. But in those cases, he'll take the person's cart and he'll just put it behind their car and just watch them absolutely lose their minds and pretend that he is the bad guy. And I get it. He is absolutely antagonizing these people. But you can kind of see as he moves behind the car here, he probably put the bumper sticker on. But if he didn't do that, he's probably going to grab the cart in this particular case. And with the good old coronavirus, he's cleaning the thing off. So I think he's probably going to try to move the cart behind the car. Maybe not. But to watch these people kind of lose their mind and immediately make this guy out to be some sort of bad guy when he's really just trying to do something relatively positive. Maybe he's doing it for the entertainment value, but he loves it. And it's so, so entertaining to watch these minds explode. And it's fascinating to watch like a third of them almost immediately he'll tell the guy, A, stop filming me. And B, if he doesn't stop filming, they threaten to call the police, as if he's committing some sort of crime for pointing out that they could have just returned the cart into the cart corral. And the reason that I bring this up, and I'm probably going to keep bringing it up because it's my favorite YouTube channel by far, is that specifically, I think yeah, thank you. Thank you for that, Lunatic Jerry Lean. I think I've watched them all in the last 2 days. Because they're all like every single one of them is just like so fascinating and interesting. But the reason that I bring it up is because I've spent a little bit of time on this, but not enough. That there's some psychological thing that happens, and it's some form of cognitive dissonance that when somebody gets called out and they know that they're wrong, that discomfort that washes over the person creates such discomfort that they just kind of immediately transform. So it's a lot easier, and we talked about this on the show a lot, to just find information that confirms your priors and confirms maybe not even your biases, but what you understand to be true. And when somebody calls you out for it and shows irrefutable evidence that you're wrong, it causes a psychological effect in you that makes you feel very, very uncomfortable. So you're actually, programmed to find information that's going to make you feel better about the position that you already hold. And when you see information that's the exact opposite, it's going to kind of make you angry. So it's some form of cognitive dissonance, but that's what you're seeing here is these people that would ordinarily not, and I shouldn't say ordinarily, but I would say that I would hope in a lot of circumstances would say, you know what, you're right. I put the cart in a handicap spot, and it's shocking how many of these people just throw the cart in the middle of a handicap spot and walk away like it's no big deal, including at least two of the videos I think I saw. It was a handicap person putting the cart in another handicap spot. But these people immediately just lash out at the guy for calling them out instead of doing the right thing. And this is what I see from the people that are standing behind Michael Amira when he's talking about this stuff is they start applauding like, yes, you're right, we are the victims here, rather than kind of doing a little bit of self-reflection. And when they hear these, interesting, really when you see and watch the videos and these police officers are hearing the public criticize them, I can imagine the exact same thing is happening in their mind. Instead of saying, you know what, there is a problem here, they say, no, screw that guy. That guy is wrong, or that social justice warrior is wrong, or that angry person is wrong, and they should just go back to doing yoga. They should just go back to posting their memes. Or as lunatic Mark Lazarchuk says, get Lou a hobby. They're probably saying that exact same thing about the people who are criticizing them. And in a way, it strengthens their resolve. And that's a little bit of what we're seeing. So with that, what's interesting about how we can all just be angry and say, you're wrong, you're wrong, you're wrong. I think part of what we all need to really realize, and I'm guilty of this during this whole last 30 minutes of diatribe here, is that by calling out police officers in the wrong way, it might actually strengthen their resolve that they're right. And there's something called the backfire effect. That's a little bit of kind of what I'm talking about. And maybe it's not about strengthening their resolve, but you're certainly not going to change their mind. And this is what, Hot Mike 3 was so fired up about yesterday, is that, his journey over probably a decade in accepting something that was harder for him to accept didn't come through being shamed into the corner. It actually came through being exposed and having a more friendly level of awareness that helped with him kind of understanding what it was that he maybe didn't fully understand. And so while it can be easy to just like watch this Michael Amira guy and just like recognize how clueless his messaging comes across, it's going to be interesting to see the conversations that we're going to be having over the next, I hope, coming weeks, but what's probably more likely to be the next several months and several years for all of the police reform that's about to happen, is that it's going to have to happen over conversations so that both sides can see the other side's perspective. Because of everything that Michael Amira said in his entire little diatribe there's really only one thing that stood out to me where I think he had a point. If the police are really having 300 million interactions with the public and it's ending up, having the worst possible outcome in that tiny, tiny little percentage, it's not that tiny little percentage isn't absolutely abhorrent and needs to be eliminated, and that's what his message really needs to be. But he's got a point that the vast majority of police interactions are relatively friendly. And by the vast majority, I mean all but a very, very, very minuscule few. But that's not to say that an enormous amount of work doesn't need to be done to fix it, because the consequences of those actions are permanent. Right before I went on live, I watched a video of a guy in Austin, Texas, got hit in the forehead with a beanbag round. that ruined his and probably his family's life. Um, and, pretending that that was non lethal force used to try to disperse a crowd, and who knows what the circumstances behind that were, because I didn't get a chance to really look into it. But there's clearly a tough job to be had there. But when the consequence of screwing it up costs one person their life, many people their lives, that's something that has to be more aggressively addressed. And how claiming that Michael Amira's badge is squeaky clean, as he does in his badge, and how he is not he is not Derek Chauvin. That's 100% accurate. But to pretend that he doesn't have some sort of culpability in wearing the same uniform, and not leading with his message about how bad what Derek Chauvin did, he's not going to get any sympathy from the public, especially from the kind of undecided. So it's a little bit harder to do jokes here when when lunatic Dan Hunt or lunatic Mark Lazarchuk aren't in here heckling me a little bit more often. But I just wanted to talk about that video. We'll throw that stuff in the show notes and try to get the supercut and some Cartnark stuff, because if there weren't enough jokes in this episode, which I agree with you, there certainly weren't, the Cartnarks will give you endless hours of entertainment. Jerry Lean here in the comments is saying there's 29 of them. It feels like there was a lot more, and I'll tell you, they are dense. Like, every single video is dense with like some comic relief in how the guy handles very, very like a ton of escalation from the other side. And he's not innocent himself. He deliberately escalates it to make the entertainment value go up, but it is worth it. And with that, I really, really hope all the lunatics out there kind of consider what I had to say today, in that just outright attacking somebody that you don't agree with isn't, and shaming them into a corner isn't going to be the effective outcome that I think you want when you're trying to do that. Maybe the outcome is you just want to feel better about yourself to make somebody else feel inferior. And you know what? You're going to be successful. You're going to feel a little bit better about yourself by shaming them. But I would ask you to kind of consider if that's really doing any good. And maybe instead come from an approach that you want to try to understand their perspective and have a conversation and see how that goes instead. I am just as guilty as anybody of doing it, but hopefully between some Cartnarks, a weird cop who probably can't hear himself talk or put himself in the shoes of the people that are listening to his message, could potentially understand. But yeah, hope everybody kind of thinks about that and takes that into the next show. And as Mark Lazarchuk is now pleading, you know what? Let's do this. Lunatic Mark Lazarchuk, I think, is making his case to be the next co-host of hotlou Happy Hour. So let's see how the lunatics feel about that, because Mark Lazarchuk is the only person to have appeared. Oh, I shouldn't say that. Another loyal lunatic, Ryan Walseth, or Wally, has been on the show twice, but Lazarchuk is the only person to have appeared on the show twice. So I'm going to create a poll here and see what everybody has to say. And if you're just watching on a watch party, this poll might not come through. We'll see what... These are going to be live results here. Let's go ahead and publish the results here, and see what people have to say. And mine is Lazarchuk. Oh, I forgot to say, yeah, Lazarchuk has been brave enough to be one of the few people to grow out his beard and shave his head, which, if I didn't have so much Native American blood in me, I probably would be able to grow a beard. But this is as much facial hair as I have, and I shaved on Saturday morning, and it is now Wednesday, and I am a good probably 3 weeks away from having anything that would look like even a goatee, but I would never be able to grow a beard. So the beard and the shaved head, not going to happen. I'm sorry, Lazarchik, you can't see the poll. Oh wow, we have one. We have one person. We have 100% of the votes right now saying Mark Lazarchik needs to be the co-host, and we'll report the live results here in a moment. But it does help having a co-host. I'm not gonna lie. I'm starting to learn how to host it uh, all by myself because that will need to happen every once in a while, or have a different co-host. But uh, I'm going to take this opportunity also to remind everybody that if you want to subscribe on YouTube, just search for hotlou Happy Hour on YouTube in Google or whatever, and it'll come up and you can subscribe there and you hit the bell and it'll tell you when new episodes are available. Go ahead and I promise the podcast is coming. I know I keep saying that, but it's also on hotlou, at hotlou on Twitter. We're trying to get it going on LinkedIn as well. But and you know what? Every single time you hit the like button, you hit that heart button, you comment on the live feed, it really, really, really helps spread the show and encourages Mike and I to keep this alive, because we've been having the conversation about how we kind of move forward as, 4 o'clock to 5 o'clock Central starts to become, as summer in Minnesota is opening up, it's going to be a little bit more of a challenge to run the show. So by telling your friends, inviting them to the show, recommending it, resharing it, liking, commenting, all of those things help the show. And we do want to keep it going, but we also need to consider how we're going to manage that kind of moving forward. And your support is everything that we need to make it happen, because we love the show. This is the show that we wish that we could watch more of. We get great feedback from the people who do tune in. So if you're out there and you're a social media influencer by your own right, go out and share the show. Kimber has a good point that a morning show is potentially in the works, but we're trying to make that work. And final poll results here, literally an even split here. Lazarchik, we've got 33% of the people saying yes, you should be co-hosting, 33% saying no, and 33% saying they have no idea who you are. So, okay. With that, I want to thank everybody for tuning in to today's somewhat different and somewhat experimental, but bat-free hotlou Happy Hour. I am your host, hotlou.